Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. And if you want to get notified anytime that these videos go up, you can go ahead and click that subscribe button down below. But before we get started, I do like to go over some new announcements and discoveries I just found out about over the past week, but there wasn't anything too groundbreaking, so I don't think there's anything we need to go over this week. But one more very last thing before I get started is I do want to mention to go ahead and check out Alex over at Board Game Co, because he puts out a ton of different videos from reviews to previews, and Alex and I do work together putting together these lists of upcoming campaigns. We both track these campaigns independently, but then we collaborate and make sure that our information is sound so that we're always providing you with the most up-to-date info as possible. These dates are always changing, there's new campaigns being added and removed all the time, which is why I do these every single week. But if you want to get a little bit of a head start of what to expect, Alex does put out a video at the start of each month going over the entire month and letting you know what we know about so far. As I said, he also has a ton of other videos going into each of these campaigns in more detail as they're actually running on Kickstarter. He puts in a ton of work and is definitely deserving of some support, so if you want to check out his channel, I have him linked in the description below. But now let's get back to the Kickstarters, and we do have quite a few this week, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on February 20th, and this is called Kuiperium. This plays 2 players and takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play, and this is a competitive worker placement. And the way that this game works is that players are going to be trying to get their ship to the end of the board first, and in order to move your ship up the board, you're going to need that many discovery points as indicated on each space. But in order to get these discovery points, you're going to be performing different actions by putting workers and cards out onto the main board. And a really interesting aspect of this game is the way that the cards work, because each player is going to be starting with a hand of cards, when these cards have a whole bunch of different uses, because you're going to be spending actions in order to play those cards out on the main board, and each of the cards is going to have some sort of ability that gets activated when you do this. Then the card also becomes an action space. Something to note here is that only your opponent can use the card as an action space, so whenever they put their worker out on that card, they're going to be gaining some sort of benefit as well that you're going to want to be aware of. But then also when players recall their workers, they're also going to gain another benefit. And some of the different benefits you'll get for performing these different actions are resources and money that you can then convert into upgrades for your ship and to make your actions more efficient, allowing you to scan areas better to find more resources, or in order to scan deeper into the solar system to gain more discovery points and help you move further up that track. Players can also use an action to discard their cards for additional resources, and players will always be drawing up another card at the end of their turn. And the player that reaches the end of the board first wins the game. And the next campaign we have also launching on the 20th is called Star Colonies, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 120 minutes to play. And the way this game works is that each player is going to be starting the game with a starter deck with a few different types of ships, and players are competing to be the first to get to 4 victory points. But instead of gaining victory points for combat and fighting the other players, instead you're going to be gaining victory points for each outpost that you're able to build, and 2 victory points for each outpost that you're able to upgrade into a colony. And in typical deck builder fashion, you're going to be drawing a few cards from your draw pile and then using them and then adding them to your discard pile. And any new cards that you buy will also go directly into your discard pile. And as I mentioned, there's a few different types of ships in this game, and the first one is the scout ship. And you're going to be playing these from your hand in order to explore the exploration deck. So for each scout card that you play, you're going to be able to draw a card from that exploration deck. There can be a few different cards in this deck, but what you're looking for are different locations, because some of these locations can be colonized, but in order to do that, you're going to have to meet some sort of requirement outlined on that card. But when you find this card, you can put your player marker on it to indicate that you have scouted that planet. And when you do finally meet that requirement, you're not only going to be gaining the victory points for that outpost or colony, but you can also gain additional benefits like additional resources or special abilities. And then there are the transport ships that you're going to be sending out to gain resources and money, which you can then use to gain more cards. And one thing to note about this game is that when you do reuse your discard pile, you're not actually going to be shuffling it up. The order of your cards does matter, because that's going to stay intact when it goes to become your draw deck. So as you're discarding cards or buying new cards, you're going to want to think about the order that those are going into your discard pile. And another really important ship to know about is the warship, because as players are trying to build out colonies on these different locations, if you're not protected, the other players might want to swoop in and take that planet for themselves. And this is where the warships come into play, because depending on which side you're on, you're either going to be using these ships to initiate an attack or to defend against one. And if you are in an attack, you can always deploy more of these warships in order to reinforce your side. And then at the end of your turn, you're going to be drawing back up to your hand limit, and then the game continues like this until someone reaches that threshold of victory points, and then that player is going to win the game. And if this one does sound interesting to you, you can find a link to the campaign in the description below, and you'll want to follow along so that you get that limited edition card added to your pledge completely for free. Also launching on the 20th, we have a brand new expansion for the game Dig Your Way Out, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 40 to 45 minutes to play. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a game where players are competing to be the first to escape the prison by digging their way out. In order to do that, players are going to be taking turns performing 2 actions on their turn, and you're going to be able to do different things like move around to different areas on your board, with each of these locations offering some different benefits. And the actions that players might want to perform at these different locations could be to search in order to gain the number of cards as indicated on that space, which they can then use a different action known as the craft action, where you can actually use those cards to build other items such as things to help you dig, or perhaps weapons that you might want to use to attack or defend yourself against the other players. If you want to move, you're going to be rolling a number of dice, which is going to determine which spaces you're able to move to, but players can also do things like join the different gangs within the prison if they meet the requirements of that gang, and doing that will allow you to gain the passive ability of that gang. Players can also play action cards from their hand in order to perform the special action outlined on that card, but players can also do other things like heal their damage, buy from a shared market, steal spoons from the cafeteria, and like I said, attack the other players. And when you do that, you're basically asking them to give you one of their items, and they can either choose to do that and avoid the fight, or they can either choose to fight you and the winner will gain some sort of benefit. But of course, the whole point of this game is to actually dig your way out, so gaining all those different tool cards is completely useless unless you're actually spending them in order to help dig your tunnel. But the only place that you can actually dig is in your cell block, so you're going to want to take those tools back to your cell space and then spend those cards that you've crafted or gained through questionable means in order to gain the number of tunnel points outlined on them, eventually reaching the threshold that you need in order to escape the prison. And the first player to do that wins the game. At the point of filming this video, there's not a whole lot of info on the new Dig In expansion, but it is going to be adding some new locations for you to perform actions at, and it's also going to be adding a warden that, if I were to take a guess, is going to be moving around the board, causing havoc for the players and probably limiting the actions that you can perform at the different locations. But as I said, I don't have a whole lot of info right now, so if you do want to know more, I recommend checking the link in the description below where you can go check out the campaign for yourself and find all the info there. Also launching on the 20th, we have Reviving Kathmandu, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 20 to 40 minutes to play. And this is the next game coming from Lemery Games that's part of their series of games that takes you to different locations in the world, with the previous game being Chile Mafia that took you to Mexico, which was a really well-regarded game when it launched, and I think it was also my pick of the week, which is interesting because this one is a party game, which I don't normally gravitate towards, but the design on this one really did impress me, and I think it will appeal to more of the gamer-type gamers out there. And this one's impressing me as well because it really is offering you a solid game with a really simple rule set, which is never a bad mix. This one is taking players all the way to Nepal, where players are going to be competing to build different structures, earning victory points for the type of structure that you're able to build, but then also for the victory points outlined on those cards. So there is some set collection here where you're trying to create different combos of cards, but this one is a bluffing game because players are going to be bidding in order to acquire those different cards. And I really like the way that the bidding works here because each round players are going to be using their limited number of bid tokens in order to bid for either a row or column of cards. And adding on top of this, each of these cards are dual use, which I think is a really nice addition to this mechanism because it adds a lot more utility to each of these cards, making them a lot more attractive, which means that more players are probably going to want them. There's 4 cards available for players to bid on each round, but each player is only going to be able to bid on 2 of those cards because wherever they end up putting their token, they're going to be bidding on essentially that entire row, and then whichever player has the higher bid in that intersection point of those tokens is going to be gaining those cards. This means that you could be winning up to 2 cards each round, but you might just win one of those cards or even none of them at all. But something that's nice about this game is that no matter what the outcome is, you're always walking away with 2 cards because any of the cards that you didn't win, you're going to be drawing that number of cards from the draw deck. And of course the benefit here is that if you're winning the cards, you're actually getting the cards that you want, whereas if you're drawing from the deck, you might end up with something that's less useful. But of course this is a bidding and bluffing game, so the other players don't know exactly which token you're putting out from your supply. So if there's not a card out there that you particularly want that badly, you could always put out one of your lower tokens just to get rid of it, since drawing from the deck might actually be the better option. And once the players have acquired their cards, they're going to be choosing one of the decide to either start their building with or to add on to an existing building, earning the victory points for any buildings that they're able to complete. And the game continues like this for a series of rounds, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And as always, you can find links to this campaign and all the others I have to mention in the description below. And the next campaign we have launching on the 21st is Street Fighter V, the Champion Edition Legends. And this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a campaign that was supposed to launch a few months back, so I did already cover this one, but this one got pushed back until now, and there has been some changes since then. Essentially, Colossal Games bought the rights to develop and produce this game from Blacklist Games, so Colossal Games is taking a lot more control into their hands. But since I did already cover this one, I don't think the actual gameplay changed too much, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And this is a scenario-based cooperative game where players are going to be choosing a scenario and then also choosing one of the many nemesi, and then mixing them together to create the setup for the game. Each nemesis is going to come with its own nemesis deck, making it feel a lot different than the others, and also they're each going to come with their own double-sided board that gets flipped over midway through the game, with the second side being more difficult than the first. And of course, each player is going to be able to choose their own character to play, and each character is going to come with a board to track their health and experience, as well as their ability tiles, which are used to activate the character's special moves. And these tiles are also double-sided with a more powerful version of that attack on the backside, and you'll be able to flip that if you can upgrade it at some point in the game. And players also have a single more powerful special ability that you'll also be trying to unlock. And a neat thing about this game is that each character is unique, but you can also mix them with any style deck, so you can mix and match them however you like, creating a very different feel even if you're playing the same character as before. And not only is there a nemesis that all the players are going to be fighting against, but there is also going to be a rival for each individual player. And there's going to be a whole bunch of rivals that you can choose from, and each player can just choose who they want their rival to be, or you can draw them randomly. But the way this game works is that each turn you're going to be drawing 4 cards from your style deck, and these are going to give you different movement or ranged and melee attacks, or even just allow you to increase your experience meter. Attacks in this game are resolved using dice rolling, but you can spend your experience tokens in order to issue some rerolls. And the way that the enemies work in this game is pretty interesting because the weaker minions are going to be moving after each player has had a turn, whereas the more stronger rival enemies are going to be moving after all the players have had their turn. At this point, players are also going to draw a nemesis card, which can spawn more enemies, move enemies around, and cause them to perform special attacks depending on what nemesis you have. And the nemesis doesn't actually start on the board at the beginning of the game, but they will be spawned onto the board after you've gone through their nemesis deck just once. And one thing to note about this game is that the game was designed by Blacklist Games, but then Colossal Games bought exclusive rights in order to print and sell it, but they only bought the rights for a single print run. So Colossal Games is saying that there's only ever going to be one print run. I don't know if they're able to buy the rights again to do another print run, but it sounds like this is only going to Kickstarter and there's not going to be another opportunity to get it in the future. So if this one does sound interesting to you, then you might want to check it out, and I have links in the description below. Also launching on the 24th, we have Tether, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 15 to 30 minutes to play, but this is essentially a 2-person or 2-team game. So if you're playing with 4 players, you're going to have 2 players that are on the same team. And something I really like about making these videos is that it's often these smaller games that end up impressing me the most because they do fly under the radar a little bit and don't get quite as much attention as those bigger games, but there are quite a few gems here, and they often do pop up in these smaller games, which is also one of the reasons that I think it's super valuable to subscribe to this channel, because I will point these games out. And just like the other game, Kathmandu, that I pointed out this week that looked like a fantastic game with an easy to learn rule set, I think this falls into that same sort of category where it's offering you a really excellent game with a very simple rule set, but I do think there's a little something extra special with this one, which is the reason that I'm making this one my own personal pick of the week. And that reason that I am making this one my pick of the week is that I think it has a set of mechanisms used in a really innovative way that makes the game flow really nicely, while also creating a game that looks like a ton of fun. And as I said, this is not a complex game by any means when it comes to the components, because this one is just essentially a deck of cards with different numbers on them. But there is an interesting pattern here because each card can have up to 2 numbers, with one of the numbers being the mirrored inverse of the other. So for example, if you have a 79 on one side of the card, then the other side is going to have a 97. And one thing that you might have noticed is that one of these numbers is upside down depending on which side of the table you're sitting at, because each player is going to be sitting on opposite sides of the table, and then they're only going to be able to use the numbers that are facing their direction. This means that whenever you're putting a card out with a number that you want, you also have to consider the number that you're giving your opponent access to. And of course, the whole point here is that you're trying to chain together the longest chain of cards consecutively in order to score more victory points. But something to note here is that you only want to do this in one direction, because one player is going to be playing as the vertical player while the other player is playing as the horizontal player. So what that means is that you only want to chain those cards together in that direction while simultaneously trying to limit those opportunities for your opponent. And to do this, players are going to be taking turns, and on a turn you basically have one of two actions. You can either play a card into space, which is the main area of the board, or you can play a card adrift, which is a set of cards that are off on the side of the table. And the drift area is just a set of cards that are available to both players, and if you play a card there, you'll be able to take a card from the drift area into your hand, securing it as your own card, or instead you could choose to draw that card from the deck if there's nothing in the drift that you want. But of course, the main thing you want to do is to play cards into space, because that's the way that you're going to be earning victory points. But in order to do that, you must connect the card that you're playing with another card. But the nice thing about this is that you can either connect it with a card that's already in space, or if there's a card in the drift area that you can connect to, you can connect to that, starting a whole new group of cards. And if you have multiple cards in your hand that you can connect together consecutively, you can play all of those cards at once into a new group, or connecting it with another area out on the board. And it's this efficiency of card play that I think is really interesting because of the way that the game scores. And the way that scoring works is that it's triggered by the number of cards in the group. The first trigger is at 6 cards, the next trigger is at 10, and then the last trigger is at 14. And it's because of these different trigger points that the timing of how you play your cards is so important, because you're going to be wanting to trigger those groups of cards where you have the most cards there, and then you're going to be trying to not trigger those groups where your opponent might have a lot of cards. And once you reach that first group of 14 cards, that's also going to trigger the end of the game. So after scoring that group, you're going to see who has the most victory points, then that player or team is going to win the game. And because one player is playing as the horizontal player and the other player is playing as the vertical player, it's super easy to see which player has the lead in each individual group, since it's going to be longer or wider depending on which player is in the lead. Once again, just a really small design detail that just makes this game a lot nicer to play. And of course, if you're interested in this one, you can go ahead and find a link to the campaign in the description below, and you can click on that Notify Me button if it hasn't launched yet. Also launching on the 21st, we have Ascension Tactics Inferno, and this plays 1 to 4 players, and this is an expansion to the Ascension Tactics miniatures deck building game, which if you're not familiar with is exactly like it sounds, where it combines deck building with many aspects of a miniatures board game, where you're going to be having your miniatures put out on a board, and then moving them around, interacting with different areas of the board, and attacking other players that you might encounter. The game offers a whole bunch of different scenarios that players can play that are tailored to the different player counts, but also add a little bit of variety depending on which scenario that you decide to play. Players are going to be starting the game with their drafted champions as well as a basic starter deck, and then players are going to be drawing a hand of cards and then playing those cards on their turn to do different things like place their miniatures out on the board and then use their abilities when you do that, which can allow you to do things like draw more cards, manipulate the cards in play, prune your deck, or give you some passive benefits. Of course, some of these cards can also be associated with an amount of money, and when those come out, you'll be able to spend those cards to purchase some basic cards that are always available, as well as other cards that might turn up in a river that's constantly changing. And once you've played a character card and put that character out on the board, they're going to gain 1 activation per turn until they are removed, and that's going to allow them to do things like move around on the board or attack other characters. And whenever you do that, you're going to be comparing their strength and defense, but one thing to note here is that damage is not carried over. All characters heal at the end of a round, so if you're trying to attack a stronger character, that means you might have to attack it with multiple characters, or to try and buff up one of your characters so that it's able to take that other one out. And of course, the whole goal here is to be the first to try and earn a certain number of victory points, and the main way to do that is to control certain areas of the board, and the longer that you're able to do that, the more victory points you're going to be earning each round. This new expansion is a standalone expansion, which means that you don't need any previous content in order to play it, but if you do have that previous content, you can combine these to add a lot more variety to the individual games. It's also going to introduce a new faction as well as scenarios for 4-player co-op, and it's also going to introduce transforming characters, where if you're able to achieve a certain objective before the end of the game, then your champions are going to power up into a new form. And once again, this is another game with a really great rating on BoardGameGeek, so if you are a fan of deck builders but you're looking for something with a little bit more of that area control aspect and involving miniatures, then this is definitely something you'll want to check out, and I have links in the description below. Also launching on the 21st, we have Encounters Shattered Waste, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 100 minutes to play. And this looks like a really fun cooperative boss battler where players are going to be choosing their characters at the start of the game, then also choosing a boss to go up against, and of course trying to defeat that boss before the boss defeats them. But something that I really love about this game is the way that the characters work, because each character is going to have the normal hero state, then they also have their shattered state. And when you go into your shattered state, you're going to be a little bit more vulnerable, but you're also going to be a lot more powerful. So even though you might be more of a glass cannon in the state, you will want to trigger it at some point in the game if your health gets too low, since it's going to reset your stats and charge your health back up to full. And the way that players play this game is by using this combat board, and you're going to be putting your selected boss out in the middle of the board, along with their boss card, which is going to dictate their different abilities, as well as the number of dice that they get to roll in their turn. And the board has a number of lanes where the boss will be issuing its attacks to, and each of these lanes are associated with a different value of a die. So when you do go ahead and roll the die on the boss's turn, that's essentially going to say which lane its attack is going to get issued to, and you're going to be drawing that from its stamina deck. Each player gets 2 actions per turn, and their characters are going to stay within these blue squares for the entirety of the game. At the start of the game, you can put your character in any spot that you want, but depending on the character that you're playing as and the different abilities that they have access to, it might dictate whether or not you want to be in the front column or the back column, because that's going to have different effects in combination with your character and their abilities, but that might also change as you develop more abilities or different situations come up within the game. Players are going to be rolling dice as dictated by their character card, as well as use the different abilities they have access to in order to attack the cards in their lane. And whenever you defeat a card, it's going to go back to the fatigue deck on the monster side of the board. But of course, making these attacks and using these different abilities can use up a certain number of magic points, which you might want to refresh at some point in the game. And also, whenever you defeat an enemy, it's going to add a certain amount of threat to your character, and that's something you'll want to keep an eye on, because anytime that your threat reaches its maximum amount, that's going to put you into your shattered state permanently. And like I said before, you might want to time that depending on the situation in the game. Of course, there's also your health to worry about, because you don't want to die, so there is also a refresh action you can take in order to manage your magic points, your health status effects, or to try and reduce your threat. And on the enemy's turn, you're going to be flipping up 1 card in each lane where there is a character, and then that's going to let you know what sort of effect that card's going to have. It can issue damage, it can also cause additional threat, and even have some other effects. Some of these cards are much worse than the others, so that means that players are going to want to try and permanently get rid of those ones first. But that's easier said than done, because as I said, when you defeat a card, it just puts that card into the enemy's fatigue area, and that does not permanently get rid of the card. Instead, that just becomes its new draw deck as soon as its stamina deck runs out. But this is a really important point in the game, because when that stamina deck does run out, it's going to put the enemy into a staggered state. And what this means is that when the enemy is in that state, any of the cards that you're able to defeat, instead of going into the fatigue pile, will go into a permanent discard. And you can think of this as actually dealing damage to the enemy, because if you're able to get all the cards over to that permanent discard pile, then you have won the game. Or I guess I should say you have almost won the game, because as soon as you get to that point, the enemy's going to flip over to their enraged side, and there might be some final things that you have to deal with before you can walk away scot-free. A really interesting game here, and I think it's another one that has a really solid design. So if this one looks interesting to you, you can go ahead and sign up to get notified on their website, or if the campaign has launched, you can check it out for yourself, and you can find links to their website in the description below. And launching on February 21st, we have Lords of Vegas Americana. This plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play, and this is an expansion for one of my favorite games of all time, which is, of course, Lords of Vegas. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a game that simulates players building up different casinos in Vegas and then earning money based on the casinos that they own. And just in terms of the design on this one, I think it is one of the most perfect games ever made. Not only is it super easy to teach and play, but it also strikes that perfect balance of being strategic enough that your decisions actually matter and make sense, but then it offers enough randomness and chaos that adds a little bit of character to the game, really sells that Vegas theme, but then just really brings in those really exciting moments where someone's putting it all out on the line and you get to see them either fail or succeed spectacularly. And there's a few different types of themed casinos that players can build, each with a different color, and at the start of each turn you're going to be drawing a card from the casino deck, and depending on which type of casino that is, it's going to trigger that casino to pay out to its owners. So for example, if a purple casino card was drawn, all the players that have a die out on a purple casino are going to be gaining money equal to the millions of dollars of the number of pips that they have out on those casinos. And you might have noticed that each of these dice do have a different color, and that just indicates which player that die belongs to. But you might have also noticed that there are different colored die even within the same casino, because if you have a casino of the same color beside another casino, that just counts as a single casino, but the player that has the highest die within that group of tiles is the boss of that casino. And the difference with being a boss of a casino is that when that casino's card is drawn, not only will you gain the money with respect to the pips you have there, but you're also going to be gaining the victory points equal to the number of tiles within that casino. And when those casino cards are drawn, they do remain face up for all players to see, because there's only a certain number of each casino in the deck, and knowing which cards have come out the least are going to indicate which ones are the most likely to come out in the future. But on a player's turn, they can do as many actions as they want, and they have a few actions to choose from. You can either build on a lot that you already own, just paying the amount that is outlined on that lot, and then you'll be able to choose any casino tile of your choice and then put it on that lot. And as I said, if tiles of the same color are side by side, they become part of the same casino. So if the player decided to build a brown casino tile here, then that would immediately attach them to this other casino, which they might want to do because they're going to be putting a 5 die there as indicated on that space, which means that they would be the boss of that casino since all the other die here are lower than a 5. And one thing to note here is that players will be gaining a new lot each and every turn, because each of the casino cards does have a lot number associated with it. And whenever you draw that card, you're going to be gaining that lot just by putting your colored token on it. And this is important to note for the next action, because not only can you build on your own lots, but you can also build on the unclaimed ones. And this is called sprawling. And in order to do that, you have to build adjacent to a casino that you already own. But you know, this isn't entirely legal, so you'll have to pay twice as much in order to do so. And also, if another player ends up drawing that lot number in a future turn, then they get to claim that lot legally along with anything that you've built there. Let's say you built a casino and you want to change it to a different type of casino. There is an action for that called the remodel action. And of course, this will also cost you millions of dollars, but whenever you do that, you can change the tiles from one of your casinos to tiles of a different color, because this player could change their pink casino into the color matching their adjacent casino, and since they have the higher dice there, those casinos would then combine, and then they would also be the boss. But of course, your title there can be contested because there is another action called the reorganize action. And the blue player might want to do this because in order to reorganize a casino, you just have to pay millions of dollars equal to the number of pips there, and then you can pick up all the dice and re-roll them, hopefully making your dice there of a higher value, and your odds of being the boss there, of course, are higher if you are the one with more dice in that casino. And of course, the final action you can do is just to gamble your money at another player's casino. And the odds are not in your favor when you do this, but if you need a little bit more money on your turn, it is sometimes worth it to try and play those odds. But just remember that if you do lose your money, it will go to the player that owns that casino. And the game essentially continues like this. And of course, the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins, but this new expansion is going to be introducing some new ways that you can play the game. And the main way it's doing that is by introducing alternate boards for iconic locations like Reno, Tombstone, Atlantic City, and New Orleans. Each of these boards are going to have their own unique mechanisms associated with them, as well as different ways you can gamble your money, like playing poker instead of craps. The campaign is also going to be offering some upgraded components, and I'm really interested to see what they change here, because it's this reason that it's not my pick of the week despite being one of my favorite games of all time. And the reason for that is that their previous campaign, the upgrades weren't quite as significant as I would have hoped. I would have loved to see some new artwork, or at least non-paper money. And these are expansions that I do want, and I 100% will be buying them, but if there's not a significant upgrade in the artwork or the presentation of the game, I'm less inclined to even want a deluxe my version of the game, so I will probably just end up buying in retail. But either way, this is a design that I love, so I'm just happy to get new content on it either way. And as always, you can find links to the campaign in the description below. And the next campaign we have launching on the 21st is actually offering 3 different games, and the first one is called Aguenda. And this is a game for 1 to 5 players. It takes about 20 to 40 minutes to play, and this is a tile laying game where you're trying to create different patterns of umbrellas. And a really interesting aspect of this game is the way that you draft the umbrellas, because you're going to take a full row and a diagonal from the top. So you could either take this 1 umbrella and gain a coin, take these 2 umbrellas for free, or take these 3 umbrellas by paying a coin. And of course, you can go in the other direction as well. So you do get these different options with different intersections between them. But you have to be careful with the umbrellas that you do draft, because you have to place all of them into a single row on your player board, whether or not you want them there or not. And you only have 3 rows to work with. Each row also has a tourist tile associated with it, and on your turn you can choose to put a tourist there to activate it and then score the victory points for the umbrellas matching that tile. But one thing to note about this is that your tourists do stay there until you perform an action to send all your tourists back to your supply, and at that point you're also going to be rotating these tiles, moving the one from the bottom to the top of it and then sliding them all down. This means that you might want to time when you move around your tourists depending on the umbrellas you already have and the opportunities you see ahead of you. And of course, the player with the most victory points at the end wins the game. And the second game offered in this campaign is called Color Field, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 20 to 45 minutes to play. And this one is also a tile placement game, but in this one, each player is going to have their own partially painted canvas board, and then you're going to be drafting tiles from a shared area, placing those tiles out on your board with the goal of trying to match up as many colors between the edges of the tile, as well as matching up the colors between the tiles and the edges of your board. And players will not only be gaining victory points for how well they're able to do that, but also by completing different objectives, like having the longest continuous color. And the third game offered in this campaign is also another tile placement game, and this one plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 30 minutes to play, and this one's called Donut Shop. And the way that this game works is that players are going to be drafting different tiles of donuts and then trying to place them into their existing tableau, matching donuts together to earn coins for each matching donut. This isn't the only way that players can earn money, because you're also going to be trying to complete different orders, and there's going to be different orders that players have available to them. And if you're able to group together the proper donuts to fulfill the requirements of that order, then you're going to be taking that order's box and placing it on top of your tableau, covering up those donuts. This of course earns you victory points, and the player with the most at the end of the game wins the game. And if you're interested in tile placement games, you'll definitely want to check this one out, and I have links in the description below. And launching on the 22nd, we have another expansion. This one is for Aventuria, and this is a game for 1 to 4 players. It takes about 45 to 180 minutes to play, and this game offers a head-to-head dueling mode as well as a cooperative adventure mode. In the game, you're going to be choosing your character as well as their character deck, which is each going to come with their own stats and abilities, and then you're going to be setting up the scenario according to the adventure that you want to play. This is going to dictate the enemies and boss that you're going up against, which you will put out on the main board. Each scenario also comes with a number of timer tokens, and each round you're going to be removing one of those tokens, and each time you do that, there is a chance that there will be some sort of event that could happen that could have negative effects on the players. Players, of course, are trying to defeat that final boss before that timer runs out. On a player's turn, they can take as many actions as they want or they're able, but they're going to be drawing up a hand of cards and then choosing up to 2 of those cards to place face down to assign as endurance. And what that means is that you're essentially going to be spending those cards in order to activate the other cards in your hand. And these cards that you have available might be different abilities or items or even weapons that you can equip to your character, and your character is also going to have a base action as well, which will always be available to you. And players will be using these cards in combination with the indicated number of dice in order to try and attack the enemies. After all the players have had their turn, then the enemies get a turn, and each of them are going to perform the number of actions as indicated on their card. You're going to be rolling a die for every action point that an enemy has, and then the outcome of that die is going to dictate which action that enemy takes and which player they are attacking. If the players survive long enough and then also defeat the enemy before the timer runs out, then they win the game. And this new campaign is going to be introducing 2 new expansions, one with 600 new cards, which is going to add more content to the game and provide a whole bunch of new opportunities, enemies, and characters for you to explore. And the second expansion is going to be adding a whole bunch of new adventures with the story mode, where the decisions that the players make are going to affect the outcome of the future scenarios. And of course, if you're interested in this one, I have links in the description below. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, but don't leave yet, because as always, we do have a few awesome giveaways to announce, and these are the easiest giveaways to enter ever. For this first one, all you have to do is leave a comment down below, and this one's going to be for a pledge for Crystal Age. And this is a game that can be played both competitively or cooperatively, but players are going to be playing as different heroes with their own abilities and strengths, but then you're going to be fighting different enemies and then gaining the powers of the ones that you defeat. This means that your character is going to become even stronger, which will then allow you to fight even stronger enemies until you're able to fight the strongest enemies located in the center of the board. And of course, defeating these stronger enemies is the key to winning the game, and it's going to be a little bit different if you're playing cooperatively or if you're playing competitively. And this giveaway is going to be for the €45 pledge, which is going to get you a copy of the game, and all you have to do to enter this giveaway is leave a comment down below. And you can leave any comment you want, but if you're looking for a topic, maybe let us know what power you think you would have acquired based on the last thing that you ate. The only thing I had today was a coffee, so I guess I just have the power of being super twitchy and annoying. Oh wait, I don't know if that's any different. And these next couple giveaways are a little bit smaller, so I'll just be running these ones over on the Discord. And under these giveaways, all you have to do is check out our Discord in the description below. There's a ton of value there as well, so I think it's worth checking out. But there is a giveaways channel. Visit that channel and just click the emoji underneath that giveaway, and you'll be able to enter a pledge for Dim Sum, Duel of the Dumpling, as well as Vault, which is a sci-fi tabletop role-playing game. Now let's go ahead and draw the winners for last week's giveaways, and the first one we had was for Microbots. And to draw a winner, I use this application here. All these extra names are bonus entries for my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content and you want to help make all these efforts just a little bit more sustainable, I do have a link to my Patreon in the description below. But let's go ahead and draw those comments. Oops. Let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner of Microbots is Pablo42, and he says that he really likes micro games and is making a collection of them, so I'm happy to add a new game to the collection. Congratulations, just reach out to me at adam@shelfclutter.com and we'll get that pledge all sorted out. And the next giveaway was for a pledge for the trick-taking game Fork, and we're going to do the exact same thing here, so let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner of Fork is David Humphrey, and this is one of our Patreon subscribers, so I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge, and congratulations on the win. And that's everything I have for you this week. I am filming this one a bit later than usual, which means that it's going to be going up a bit later than usual. I normally would have filmed this last night, which is why it's daylight now, so you get to see me in all my glory. I've had a busy week and I've fallen a bit behind, but as always, I'm glad you're able to still find the video, and thanks so much for watching, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.